All right, good afternoon, everybody. Well, afternoon on the East Coast at least. It is 2:30 p.m. and we're going to kick off a bit of a stream. It's been a minute since I've been on the air, and so I figured it was time to kick off the rust and get started and jump back into things. So I hope you'll forgive the various rough spots that are sure to be found in today's stream. But I wanted to talk a little bit today. We're going to give we'll wait for a little bit for some folks to join us, but we're going to give a talk today about Terraform and Azure Functions and setting up and deploying an Azure Functions app using Terraform. I previously did a demo of this for some folks using Key Vault as well. We're going to keep it pretty basic today and just deploy the Azure Functions app. We'll create an Azure Functions app. We'll test that probably by deploying it manually. Then we'll blow that away. We'll create the Terraform script to go ahead and deploy that in a programmatic way into our cloud infrastructure with Azure. And so along the way, a couple of things I want to point out today, which are sure to be fun along the way. It's been like months since I've done this. I don't know if any of my tooling's up to date. I don't know if anything's changed. And so I'm going to be learning right along with you. We're sure to explore some of the docs today. We're sure to explore some of the other fun oddities that I'm sure we're going to encounter along the way. Really happy to have you all here with us today. Again, at any time, feel free to jump in the chat and offer advice, offer moral support, offer questions, offer whatever you'd like to bring with you today. So I like to start all of my screens. In fact, I'm going to switch over to my monitor. We'll see if my OBS settings have kept pace here. We'll see. 1 second. Okay. You should be hopefully seeing Visual Studio Code with my face at the bottom right there. If we're doing that so far, then one thing has gone right, and that's all we need to start off. So what we'll do today is, right now there's a Visual Studio Code window up, but one of the things I like to do at the start of one of these streams is first I would like to thank my employer. So I'm actually I currently work as a technical director with Captech. Captech is a consulting firm, national consulting firm in the U.S. So we do all sorts of good work in the commercial sector and state government sector. Awesome work, really fun to be a part of it. We do stuff across Azure, big data, mobile, .NET, Java, all the major cloud providers, you name it. And so if you're interested in that, I'm certainly happy to talk to you about it at any point. Happy to look into that. But I do like to give them a shout out. In fact, one of the things we'll be doing today, this deployment of Azure Functions via Terraform, is actually because one of my colleagues had a question about how to do it. They hadn't gone through it before, and I thought, why not just go? We'll stream, we'll do it together, we'll have a stream, and then we'll have that video archive for later reference. So I love working at a company that supports that sort of thing. So I like to give them a shout out. And next, since this is my feed, one of the other things that I've been really trying to do every time I stream is to pay attention to various issues that are in the news. And of course, one of the things that's at top of mind right now is the violence and awful treatment of Asian Americans, and particularly what happened in Atlanta. And I know that sometimes it can be a bit of a rough thing to start a stream like this with a topic like that. But one of the things that I try to do at the top of each stream is make sure that I'm donating to a worthy cause. I'm in a very privileged position here as someone who is able to take time during a workday to stream this kind of content to you. And so it's something that I'm really grateful for. And so I want to make sure I'm at least attempting to pay that forward. And so what I did is I found a great list, and I'm going to put this in the chat actually, a great list of organizations that you might be able to donate to stop Asian hate. And so I'm going to go ahead and paste that link in the chat. And the one organization in particular that I'm just going to be donating to today is called AAPI Women Lead. And AAPI Women Lead is an organization that helps really amplify the important voices in the Asian and Pacific Islander communities, especially people who are self-identified as women and girls and have experience with violence in the past. And so I think this really checks certainly a lot of boxes for me. I think it's an incredibly important organization doing good work, and I encourage you to learn more about this work as well, and to get involved with it. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a donation here. So what I'm actually going to do is we will, sure, we'll display it. Why not? Okay. We'll go ahead. So I encourage you to do this as well. If you want to match today, certainly that's wonderful. I'd be happy to highlight that on the stream and call that out. I'll set my email address here. Of course, I'm not going to enter my financial information. We'll go to a little secret window for that, and I'll ask you to bear with me for just one moment. You all can have my phone number. That's fine. You want to give me a call, that's okay. Okay, all right, we're going to go ahead and put the rest on secret here, and we'll go through the process, and I'll be back with you in one. Okay, actually, we're having a little bit of trouble donating to that site. So I've tried two different cards, and my payment methods have been rejected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a receipt to the stream when we're done today, because I do think it's an important organization that deserves our attention. I'm not sure why their donation infrastructure isn't quite operating as I'd expect today. So tried two different cards and PayPal, and none of them are working. But we're going to go ahead and try something else in a little bit, and we'll certainly post that back on the stream. I didn't want to take too much time away. So one moment. Okay, and so this link is pretty important here. I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat. So that's the first link for the all of the organizations that you can donate to, and then I'm also going to add the link for the I'm Ready movement here as well. All right, so both of those links are in the chat. I encourage you to donate to them and check them out. And definitely, if you're able to donate to the I'm Ready movement, especially, let me know, because I'm unsure why both of my methods did not work. Okay, so we're gonna move on from there, and we're gonna move on to today's topic of how do we get an Azure Functions app deployed, via Terraform, into the Azure cloud. And so one of the things I'm going to do here today is I'm going to go ahead and open a new folder here. We'll just create a new folder for this experience here. We'll call it, we'll be really creative, Azure Functions Terraform. Sure. All right, now we've got a new folder here in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new Functions app. Now I have here, again, I'm going off of memory, so sometimes I might say I have some things, they may not quite be there, but I have here I have the Azure extension installed for Visual Studio, the plugin installed. Fantastic plugin. I'm going to go ahead and create a new Azure Functions project. I'm not going to sign into Azure right now because we're not going to actually deploy it that way, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new function project. So sure, we'll call it Azure Functions Terraform. We'll do C# here. And oh, great! I see. Thank you for following 425 show. Also, a fantastic production itself. Hoping to be on there at some point in the future. I have not forgotten Christos. So thank you for thanks for joining. Great to have you here. And so really great to see so many good faces. I heard when I got back into streaming, it was really nice to hear that some folks who I enjoy and admire were gonna join us today. So appreciate it. Hey, I will make good on my promises, Christos, I promise. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, for now, we're just going to create this. The actual platform doesn't matter as much right now, so we're going to go ahead and do .NET Core 3 or .NET Core 3 here. What do we want our projects to be? Let's just do, in this case, a timer trigger, because again, it doesn't matter so much for us right now. We're going to create a blank project here, and it's going to be more about the deployment than anything. So let's go ahead and create the timer trigger. You know what, in fact, I'm just going to keep all of the standard namespaces because it's okay. In this case, we're going to run, what is that, every 20 minutes or something like that. So we'll keep the default everything there. In order to debug, you must select a storage account for the internal use by the Azure Functions runtime. We're going to skip that for right now because I'm actually not as concerned about that. So I just kind of want to get a project created. The Azure plugin is doing its thing, which is fantastic. Okay, so we can see here, if we go over to our files here, that we've got our our bin and object folders here. We've got our project file created. We've got our trigger here. Now I'm actually I realize, I probably want another folder for infrastructure and source code. So I'm just gonna go here and create a folder called infrastructure. I'll create a folder in the root also called source. All right, and let's go ahead and move everything, including, we'll keep the git ignore. We'll move everything here into source. We'll move the bin and object folder into source. We'll leave the VS Code folder at the top, and we'll go ahead and move that bin debug into source. Okay, so now we've got our two folders here. And you know what I'm realizing? I probably should go ahead and it looks like we do have a repository created for us here, which is great. And so one of the things I think we should do in this instance is we should let's move that up to GitHub, and just we'll commit these steps along the way as we go. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll make it a public GitHub repository here. So it's going to push it up to GitHub for me. It's not going to do what I want it to do. That is okay. I'm actually going to just use the GitHub for Windows extension, which I think works pretty well here. I'm going to add an existing repository from my repositories folder. Azure Functions Terraform. There we go. I'll select that folder. Let's add that. Okay. Can we publish on GitHub? Thought we could. I'm just going to go ahead and do one more. We're going to go ahead and say, we're going to call it Terraform Azure Functions, because I'm not trying to get tied down on this name here. We'll go ahead and initialize it. We'll give it a git ignore Visual Studio, similar to what we'd have there. License, sure, MIT, why not? Okay, we're going to go ahead and, by the way, I love that license drop down. That's a really nice feature in GitHub when you choose the license, or when you try to start a repository here. Because I often don't think about that till later in the game, but really I do want most of my stuff to be MIT, and so it's nice to have that from the outset. Okay, so now we've got our new repository here. I'm just going to go ahead and cheat a little bit and copy those files into the repository. We'll go ahead and do that. Okay, gonna go ahead and copy everything except the Git folder there. We moved it to Terraform Azure Functions, clearly a much better name. We'll replace everything that's there. Okay, now let's go ahead. We'll close our prior instance of Visual Studio Code. We'll open up our new instance. Alrighty. Great. So now we've got our source folder here. We've got, git attributes, git ignore. We've got our license. We've got a README. Excellent. All right. I'm going to go ahead now and publish that repository. Oh, wait. Right. I think we already created a public, didn't we? Interesting. Okay. Great, now we're published. We're going to go ahead and say, initial repo. Great. All right, so I've got my main branch here. Then just to see I'm going to go ahead and I hit Control-Shift-G. I actually need to add my keyboard shortcut Karnak app here to show what I'm doing shortcuts. But all right, so we do have the Terraform Azure Functions app, right? We've got our source file here, and I'll create that infrastructure folder in just a second. We'll get started with that. Okay, so we do have the repo up there. That's great. So what are we going to do first? We've got our function created here. I'm going to go ahead and just to make sure that we're not getting any of the defaults, right? We'll just say Sean's C# timer trigger function. And that's just so that when we deploy the code later, I want to make sure that we're not doing anything by default. We're actually getting some of the actual custom code that we have. So I'm just going to commit that. Just say add Sean's name. And by the way, for those of you, in fact, I am going to go ahead and enable that Karnak extension. But what I'm doing there is I'm hitting Control-Shift-P for the command palette, which I absolutely love. I've been getting really used to that, just hitting Control-Shift-P, and then usually my most recent stuff is right there in the window, which is fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and, in fact, let's see if Karnak is installed here. I do have it installed. Let's see if it comes up. I have it at the wrong side of the screen here. Let's go ahead and, where does it appear? I think I can save it to there. Okay, so we should see there at the bottom of the screen. I'm just going to test it one more time. It looks like I may need to shrink the monitor a little bit here. I'll do it at the top right, top left there actually. All right, how about that? Okay, now we can see sort of when I'm hitting a keyboard shortcut, we can see what's going on there. And that is an awesome little application called Karnak, and I'll just show you how to get that there. I use Chocolatey to get these things, so I'll just pop up my window and I'm using the Windows terminal here, which I absolutely love. I'm using Chocolatey, and so I'll say Choco list Karnak. Right, and so I can find Karnak there, and then I did Choco install Karnak from an admin prompt, and bada bing, bada boom, I've got the software, which is great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell Karnak one last thing, which is to only use keys that are listed in the key, only show keys that have Control, Shift, Alt, or Windows. I think that's what I want. Okay. So now we shouldn't see every text I type, but if I hit Control-Shift-P, then it should show up. Okay, great. All right, so now I've got Karnak showing you the keyboard shortcuts as we go. And here we go, another tip already. VS Code has a built-in presenter mode, which is a great tip, and I have not used it before, so let's try that out. Presenter mode. You know what? It may not be. I don't know if I don't have the latest release here. Screencast mode. Thank you. Toggle screencast mode. Let's give it a shot. Well, look at that. Will you look at that? That's fantastic. Okay, so we'll use that because that is better. But thank you for that tip. That's an awesome tip. And I'll have to shrink my screen a little bit here in real time. Don't mind me. Okay. Great. All right. Cool. So we've got our function here. Thank you, Christos, for that. So we've got our function here. We're going to go ahead and we've modified it a little bit. We'll go ahead and save that. I think we've already uploaded it before. Okay, so now let's get to the fun part, the deployment. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go to first I've got to be logged in to my Azure instance for this to work. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open my Windows terminal, and I've got the Azure CLI. So if we go to I list all of the packages that I have here with Chocolatey, I've got. By the way, I will never get tired of being able to click and scroll and zoom in on the terminal window. That is just so nice. Man, I love Windows Terminal. So let's go ahead and look for, I believe I have it installed. I do have the Azure CLI installed here, version 2.20. That's great. That should allow me to type AZ and get a list of commands. I do get that list of commands, which is great. Let's go and make that a little... So one of the things I'm going to want to run here, right? There's obviously a lot of commands I can be running here. What we're going to do is first we're going to go to AZ login, and I'm going to log into my account. This is what Terraform is going to use by default when you're logged in. It's going to use the AZ CLI credentials. At least it did last time I checked. So we'll see if it still does. So I'm going to go ahead and run AZ login. We see a default web browser has been opened. I'm going to go ahead and click my account there. I have now logged in to Azure. That's great. Let's go ahead. You've logged in. Now, if we see a bunch of subscriptions I've got access to, I am going to check real quick which subscription I want to use that I have over here in another window. Okay. Double checking over here off screen. Okay. I think I would like to do, okay, AZ account set. In fact, just for, I don't know if there's anything that you shouldn't be seeing here, so give me a second and I'll show you what I'm going to run in a moment. I'm going to just take this on another screen to make sure I'm not showing you something I shouldn't be. I'm pretty sure it's okay, but it's never too late to check. I can run AZ account set / subscription, and I should be able to see my subscription. Just double checking that. Subscription, making sure that it worked, and once it worked, I will go ahead and show you the command. Okay, so I think we're good. So here's, I'll bring the window back over here. All right, so the command that I ran was AZ account set -- subscription. I'm going to set it to my subscription here. So now I'm logged in with the Azure CLI, right? I've actually, I hit Azure login. I've logged into my user account, and now I've told Azure to set the default subscription that it's using to this subscription, which goes by the nickname Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. I've got a few of them with that name at this point. Okay, so I've got that subscription up. And I should be able now to go ahead and we can start working with Terraform. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create that infrastructure folder. Infrastructure. Folder. Oh, it already exists. There it is. So we've got our infrastructure folder here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop up the console in VS Code here, and I'm going to run cd infrastructure, and I'm going to run tf init. Oh, tf is not recognized as a function. I probably need to install Terraform. Let's go here and let's open a command prompt window, or an admin window here. And let's go ahead and run Choco list, just see what I've got here. I don't think I have Terraform installed. Interesting, I do have Terraform installed. I think it might have to be Terraform init. I may have given myself that shortcut previously. Yeah, it's Terraform init. Okay, I was just abbreviating prematurely on my end. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to run Terraform init. I'll scroll up a little bit there. Terraform init. All right. Terraform is now initialized in an empty directory. Directory has no Terraform configuration files. You may be begin working with Terraform immediately by creating Terraform configuration files. Okay, so let's go ahead here and create a new file, and we're going to call it why not, functions app.tf. Now you notice that the icon here changed. I've also got functionality may be limited. You may need to run Terraform init. So we also can see here, I just ran Terraform init. I've got an empty file, but Terraform has created a lock file here. This file is maintained automatically by Terraform init. Manual edits may be lost in future updates, right? So it's got a lock file that it's created here for me. So what I'm going to be doing is we're going to start off with Terraform keeping its state in our local environment. We're going to build up some infrastructure there, and then what we're going to do is we're going to push that state into the cloud itself, so that our shared state for our cloud is going to be in another storage blob, and that will allow myself, other developers to interact with that infrastructure as a group rather than it just being all of the state stored on my machine. And that's an important concept because we want to make sure that if something goes wrong or something happens to my machine, it doesn't think that it needs to create additional copies of cloud resources, or Terraform doesn't think it needs to destroy resources. We'll keep that state in a separate cloud blob in our infrastructure. All right, so let's go ahead and start with getting a functions app created. So in this case, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to go to the Terraform documentation. I've done this before, but I kind of want to make sure that we've got all of our stuff together here. So I'm at the basic Terraform page. I'm actually going to go ahead and Google Terraform function app, Azure function app. There we are. So we can see here we've got note here to connect subnet within the same region. Okay, so we're going to need an app service plan in this case. Actually, we'll do a consumption-based plan for this case. So this is a great example, and one of the reasons I wanted to use the docs directly here is because they're phenomenal with Terraform. I'm really, really pleased with their documentation time and time again. Great in-depth answers, great sample documentation, great, really anything that you can use to reference. And so even though I've done this before, I could probably pull some code from a different repository that I have. I'm really happy to kind of start from scratch and use their docs and go through the examples. So in this case, we're just going to straight up copy what they've got here, and then we'll take a look at what it's doing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, so I'm going to just copy our functions app here, or copy the example documentations into our functions app.tf. So here's what we have here. I'm going to go ahead and stop that screencast mode because I just think that text is a little bit getting in our way right now. But what we're going to do here is we've got our Azure RM group. And if that's too big, folks on the screen, let me know for sure. All right, so we've got our resource group here. And what this is saying, first off, is we're saying that we have an Azure RM or a resource group, and the resource group's name within our Terraform configuration is example. And so that's how we're going to refer to it elsewhere. Like, for example, you will see Azure RM resource group .example.name. Right, so that's how the Terraform configuration file is going to be referring to this example. We'll give it a name. We'll call it Azure Functions, and we'll call it Sean Demo. Why not? We'll go ahead and give that a location, and instead of West Europe, I think I want East US 2, but I'm going to double check that is a valid location. Let's see. Azure. I think since it was West previously, we should be okay. Azure region names. I think it's East US space 2 when it's the long name. Just want to double check. East US 2. Should be good. We'll certainly see if we're not later, but East US 2 is where I'll put this. All right, and now we're going to have a storage account, right? So we have our resource group, and now we're defining a storage account here. And the storage account in this case we're also referring to as example. So now it'll be Azure RM, storage account.example in future references to that item. We see here that the name of the storage account is Functions App Test SA. I see no reason to change that, but just for the sake of this, we'll say functions app. We'll just go ahead and call it Sean Demo again. All right, so we're calling it, and now we see we're referring to the Azure resource group name, but we're doing it by reference here. So Azure RM resource group .example.name, and that refers to this, which is great because now I don't have strings littered all throughout my infrastructure document here. Instead, I can go ahead and you refer to those by their location earlier in the file. Okay, I think I'm fine with that replication type and that account here, and we're good to go there. So next up, we actually have, our resource group where the functions demo is going to live. We have our storage account where the functions app is going to use. And then we have the application service plan that we're going to use here. And it's consumption based, so we've got a dynamic plan here. So our service plan is going to be called Azure Functions. Instead of test, we'll call it Sean Demo. Service plan. It's going to live in the resource group that we defined earlier. Or it's going to live in the location. The location is going to be the same location as the resource group. And the resource group name is going to be the resource group that we defined earlier. We do tell it it's a function app, which is what we want. We have a resource here, and now we have the actual function app itself. So we have, it's also being called example in this case. And so the name here is test Azure Functions. So again, we'll call it Azure Functions demo. Why not? We can see here that it's actually asking for a couple of things here. It's asking not just for the resource group name, which we've defined before, but we're also asking, it's asking for the storage account name and the storage account access key. But we didn't define the storage account access key up there. That's great, because one of the things that Terraform knows is after these resources are created, it knows how to go ahead and create them in the right order and plug that primary access key into this variable here to create our functions app, which is a fantastic way of building that out. So we're going to save this file here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just say basic test infrastructure. All right. We're going to go ahead and run Terraform init now in this directory, and let's see what happens. So it's initializing the backend. You can see a couple things that are happening. It says initializing provider plugins. So it's finding the latest version right now of the Azure RM, and it's actually installing that on my machine since I don't actually have it. We see here a message that Terraform has been successfully initialized. We now can begin working with Terraform, try running Terraform plan to see any changes that are required. Okay, so what I've done there with Terraform init is a couple things have happened here. We can see that, let me go here, there is in the infrastructure folder, Terraform has created a directory structure here of .terraform /provider /registry /terraform.io, right? And so it's actually gone through and downloaded the Terraform provider for Azure Resource Manager. And so we now have that exe sitting in here. So we'll add some git ignore stuff here to clean this up and make sure we're not committing it to our repo. But what we do have there is we have this sort of a lock file here. And we can see here that the lock file, which previously was empty, now has the version the version of the Azure RM Terraform provider, and it's got some hashes there that we're going to want just for for security's sake. Okay, so we've got that. So what's next? I think next up we're going to want to go ahead and run Terraform plan, which I'm going to do. And I realized that maybe there we go, easier on the screen. I'm going to run tf plan. The term to our Terraform plan, because I keep shorting it to TF, which is not their fault. Let me go ahead and clear that screen. I'll run Terraform plan. Okay. Now we see features. Required field is not set. Okay, that's interesting. So let's go ahead and see what's going on with that. I've hit this before, and the exact solution eludes me. So let's go ahead and say Terraform Azure RM feature not set. There we go. So actually in our Terraform file, we don't have anything talking about our provider yet, right? And so what we need to actually do in this case is just tell it that we're using the Azure RM provider, and we can't have this features be null, and so we're going to go ahead and just kind of put an empty object there. That should allow us, well, first let's commit that. Well, we'll see if this works. If it works, we'll go ahead and commit that. All right, we can see some things happening. For example, a .tf state file is being created, which is interesting. We'll look at that in a second. Okay, so what we see here in the output of Terraform is fantastic, really. So first of all, I'll go ahead and commit that change from before. We'll say, let's see, resource. I'm going to make this a little smaller so we can see a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead and say add empty feature set for Azure RM to avoid an error about the required block being absent. Okay, so what we've seen here from the output of Terraform plan is that we see what's exactly what Terraform would do if we were to run Terraform apply. And in this case, it looks like what Terraform would do is, remember, it would use my logged in account, which is my Gmail account under the default subscription that I've specified. And that's because I'm not specifying anything here, by the way. Just I didn't want to get into specifying specific locations and all of that. And certainly you can do that sort of thing in a Terraform file with various variables. In this case, I kind of just wanted to use my current credentials and apply based on that. So we can see based on that I've got some state files here, and based on that, it's going to create the app service plan. It's going to create the function app, right? And we can see all of the various things that are going to be known after we apply. It doesn't have what it'll be right now. Well, it's going to create the resource group. It's going to create the storage account. It'll show that it would create it as with the this replication type with a standard account tier. We're not allowing public blob access by default, so we can see exactly what it would do. At least all of the things that it can possibly know ahead of time. So let's go ahead, and before we do that, I'll pop over to the subscription here. I'm going to go ahead and let's go to resource groups on here. All right, so what we should be able to do here is, right, I've got some intro stuff. I've got some various random stuff that I've got as part of this, part of my various subscriptions here. What we'll do is we should check at this point, when we run Terraform apply, we should see that resource group get created. So I'm going to go ahead and run in my window here. I'll go ahead and run Terraform apply. All right, and we'll watch that start to kick off here. And we see again that terraform.tf state file is being created. Now again, that file is sort of tracking all of the current state, which is like sort of the diff between what we're doing. Oh, we see it's going to add, sorry, let me see. Terraform just said, I'm going to add 4 resources. I'm going to change 0, I'm going to destroy 0, right? Do you want to perform these actions? Only yes will be accepted. Yes, I would like to perform those actions. So Terraform is going to go through that process. And while it goes through that process, I do just want to call attention to that TF state file again. Right now, the entire state of what the current state of things is in the cloud is kept in that TF state file. And what Terraform is going to do is it's going to compare that state to the current state out in the cloud, and that's how it kind of knows what it wants to do, right? So does it want to create resources? Does it want to remove resources? And that's based on that understanding of Terraform's state. And I should mention here that I'm giving sort of a high level view of this. I can't, it may not be 100% technically correct to the letter. This is my understanding of Terraform so far. And so please, if I'm wrong, or if I'm not quite as nuanced about something as you wish that I were, definitely drop that in the chat, because I'm learning right here along with you. So we can see here that it's creating the resources. It's still waiting on the creation here. While we see that it's trying to create that function app, we should be able to jump over here and see that it's created the resource group though. We can see here the resource group has been created, that Azure Functions Sean demo. We can see here that it's created the storage account and the app service plan, both in East US 2, as we'd expect. And we're waiting on that Functions app to be created here. So let's go ahead. We can see that the resources are added, 0 changed, 0 destroyed. Okay, and let's go ahead and... Okay, so you can see that now the function app is there. Now, of course, our code isn't in the function app yet, right? And so, right, this is just a function app that has been deployed, right? There's no actual, right? There's probably a default function, if anything. There might actually be empty at this point. Yep. So as of this point, we have a function app with no functions, right? So we've got to find a way to kind of point that function app to our GitHub repository, which we'll do in a little bit. All right. So before I do that, I really don't like the idea of this state being on my local machine. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create another resource group. And in fact, I'm going to create another resource group actually, just to keep it separate. And I'm going to add a resource group. I'm going to call it demo infrastructure. All right, and it's going to live, I'll put it in East US 2 as well, why not? And this is where we're going to want to store our Terraform state. So this way we'll have our state in the cloud and not on our machine, and that's important to me. So the resource group has been created. I'm actually going to go ahead, and I could do this probably within Terraform as well, but we're going to keep that entirely separate and just assume that we're not using Terraform to store its own state, because, right, of course, then if something goes wrong, we don't want to have a conflict there. So I'm going to create a storage Go ahead and create a storage account. All right, the storage account name will be called demo infra structure. Helps if I spell it right. I don't think I can put dashes, right? No, okay. So no dashes in that name, just in the resource group. That'll be a good one to remember. We'll keep it standard, general purpose, sure. We'll do actually blob storage. Locally redundant is fine. We'll go ahead and create that blob. Okay. So now the deployment of that storage account is in progress, and I'm going to go ahead and look up the Terraform docs on Terraform store state in Azure. Oh, they're great. A Microsoft tutorial. Also, always nice when these things are right there in Microsoft Docs. I love it. All right, so we're going to configure the state backend here. So we can do it with the ARM access key here, but we actually can do this as well, I think. So we're going to give... Oh, and this is actually a good point too. We'll actually take a few pointers from this demo. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab this Terraform block on the screen, and we're going to put that at the top here. All right, so the resource group name is going to be called demo infrastructure. The storage account name is going to be called demo infrastructure, no dash. The container name, we have yet to create a container. We'll call it TF state, why not? Okay, where is my account here? All right, deployment is complete, so we're going to go ahead and go to that resource. I'm going to go to my containers. On the left-hand side, I'll click new container, and we'll call it was called TF state, I believe. All right, TF state is now created. Okay. So we've gone ahead and added the backend. Now that's what's going to tell Terraform where that state should be located. Now what we're going to do actually is we're going to run tf init again, and it's going to assist us in the movement of that process. And by the way, in case you see me glancing up out of the right side of my view, that's because there's a large stink bug on the skylight window above me. It has apparently also heard that I'd be getting streaming and has decided to join me. So if you hear me shriek all of a sudden because I am surprised that a stink bug is dive bombing me, just know that I'm not proud. It's fine. Okay, so we've got our backend state there, but one of the other things that was nice that the article pointed out here is that we can also specify the version for the Azure RM provider. And so here we're just saying we're using the Azure RM. We can see here that we're using 2.51.0, and so we can actually specify and constrain the versions. Now in this case we're saying just take the latest, but it's going to be wide. In fact, you know what? No, it's going to bother me if we do that. So we are going to go ahead and restrict the version here. All right, so we're going to say we want just to keep it, I think this is to keep it at the major version at 2, so 2.51 should be reasonable there. So I think we're all right in that realm. So we should have now at this point, right? We've now told our Terraform script here that we're going to use Azure RM for our state. We're also going to constrain that version number so that they come out with version 3.0 and there's a lot of breaking changes. Then we can sort of move to that as we want to. So okay, let's go ahead and look. Oh, by the way, let's look at this TF state here and just kind of get a look at what we're looking at. So this is what Terraform understands of the various states. So it basically stores it in a sort of JSON. I think it is JSON actually, or it's HashiCorp configuration language or HCL. But regardless, it's we've got some understanding here of where all the things are in our current Azure situation, what those keys are, which is why we're not going to commit that to our repo or anything along those lines. Let's go ahead and commit our Terraform file. We'll say add Azure RM backend backend. Since there's going to be an and there, that's going to bother me. So I'm actually going to go ahead and say, let's save that and do it as a separate commit, because I get really, I don't know, it bothers me when I have two different things in one commit. And if I was doing this just, and not in front of a live audience, maybe I'd slack a little bit and put them in one, but okay. And as I mentioned, I'm really happy that you're here joining us. So if you've got questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can go from there. So go ahead and I do not want to commit the Terraform state file. I'll go ahead and commit the Terraform file, and we'll say also constrain Azure RM provider to v2.x. And let's go ahead and clean this up with some git ignore here. So let's check our git ignore. We'll bring it down to the bottom of the file here, and we'll say terraform.lock.hcl. I definitely I want that ignored. Terraform.tf, actually star.tf state. Let's ignore that. And then we also want to ignore anything in .terraform, I believe. Which I need to do, I think, that way. Is that right? There we go. Okay, so ignore the TF stuff. There we go. So now we've ignored Terraform. We've got our, we won't be accidentally almost committing that mess like I just did. So we've gotten our script updated here. So let's go ahead and run tf init again. Now what I'm expecting is going to happen here is Terraform's going to say, hey, I've got this local state. Would you like me to go and put that state in the cloud at that spot that you specified? And I'm going to say, yes, I would like that. Let's see if that's what happens here. Well, first I got to use the actual app name. Man, I do think I created a shortcut or something in PowerShell previously in my profile where I was able to just type TF as a shortcut, and it is clearly coming back to haunt me now. So I typed TF init here, and we can see here Terraform is initialized. Oh, oops, I wasn't in the infrastructure directory. I'll go to the infrastructure directory. We'll try that one more time. All right, in fact, let's just clear the screen. Try that Terraform init one more time. We see initializing the backend. Version constraints are deprecated. Oh, that's funny. Version .13 earlier allowed provider constraints inside the configuration block. That is now deprecated. To silence this warning, moved it into the required providers block. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Failure responding to request, service returned an error, container not found, the specified container does not exist. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Okay, so I've got the demo infrastructure resource group, demo-infrastructure. And whenever I get into this, I always just start by first assuming I must have made a silly typo of some kind. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. I have demo infrastructure here. Copy that. Oh, it would help if I spelled that correctly. The container name there is TF state. So that was my issue there. Typo on container name. Okay, let's try this one more time. I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen. I'm getting used to, I have to reset all of my OBS settings. I realize that I have different monitors now than when I last streamed, and so I'm having to just make sure nothing's at the bottom here because I have to shrink up my monitors and update some visual stuff for the next stream. Okay, so we can see here, do you want to copy the existing state to the new backend? Pre-existing state was found while migrating the local backend to the newly configured Azure RM background. No existing state was found in the new place. Do you want to copy this state? Yes, that's phenomenally helpful. Thank you, Terraform. I would love to do that. So I'm going to say yes. Successfully configured the backend Azure RM. And what I'll do here is we see successfully configured the backend warning, and I get that same warning that I had previously, so I'll have to sort that out in a second. And so now it says we should work. So let's go ahead and look at what we've done here. So we've got our demo infrastructure here in the our demo infrastructure storage here. We've got our containers, our tf state container, and we can see now we do have a terraform.tf state file in this container, which is fantastic. That's exactly what I want. So now my state is managed there. And if I was to make a change to my Terraform script and apply it, the next time someone else was looking at those changes, they'd be able to see those changes, or rather those changes would be reflected and Terraform would be aware of them in terms of applying whatever changes the other person wanted to make. So good, so far so good. So now we've got to deploy our functions app. So you'll recall we've got our functions app here in this source, but we've got to deploy it. So let's go ahead and look at how we're going to do that. And in fact, I mentioned the Terraform documentation earlier. Let's go back to that. Terraform functions app. In the Azure function app, there's actually a definition here. So there's a source control block that we can add within the Azure Functions app. And that's going to support the repo URL, the branch, whether it's a manual integration, whether we want to use rollback enabled, and whether we want to use Git or whether we want to use Mercurial for our deployment here. So in this case, we actually will go ahead and just pop that for reference. So it's a source control block in the Azure RM function app here. So I believe it means we're going to do so. Oh, and by the way, something that I love, you'll notice when I started typing, I get the source control here, right? So I've actually got the Terraform plugin as well. And I believe it's understanding these resources and these providers. And I'm actually getting some IntelliSense here. So I can actually see the source control block, hit tab, get tab complete, which I absolutely love. So I think here I've got repo URL equals, and let's go ahead and go to that GitHub repository. I believe it was GitHub. No, I'm going to go ahead in my GitHub window here. I can actually hit Control-Shift-G, which will take me to GitHub as a web page. I'm going to go ahead and copy that just to save myself a second here. All right, so that's the repo URL. I don't think it has to be a fully qualified. I don't think I have to provide like the .git on the end of that. I think it's just the URL. Okay, branch, we'll say branch equals, please tell me it created it with a main branch. Good, okay, branch is main. The manual integration is going to be false and rollback enabled is going to be, let's make it true, why not? So manual integration equals false. Rollback, is it rollback enabled? I think it was. Rollback enabled is true. Okay, so now we've got our script change here where it's going to hopefully deploy this. And let's see now, actually it has to know sort of the folder as well. So I'm going to look at how we're actually going to do that. But for now, let's see what Terraform would do if we were going to execute this. So we're going to look at TF plan, Terraform plan. Wow, I will stop doing that by the end of this, hopefully. Terraform plan on the screen here. Pull that up. So it's acquiring a state lock. That means it's going out. It's checking that blob. It's checking that state file to understand the current sort of state of the universe. It's going to acquire a lock on that file so that I and nobody else are making changes at the same time. It's refreshing that state. And we're seeing, okay, how would it change? So it's saying, okay, the source control would change from, I guess, master, which is the default still for this provider, to main, which is what I supplied. The repo URL is this, and rollback enabled is going to be true. Let's go ahead and apply that. So I think what I'll do is I'll go, I'll clear my screen here. I'll run Terraform apply. We'll make those changes, and then we'll see what happens on the Azure Functions end. Hopefully our code's deployed, but I have a feeling we'll have to specify something else, a folder structure or something along those lines. But it's been a minute. We might get lucky. So I'm running Terraform apply here. While we're at it, let's add, we'll commit our change here. We'll say, add repo URL or repo information for deployment. Okay, we're going to hit, Terraform is asking us if we want to hit yes to accept these changes. So I'm going to go ahead and enter yes. It's going to change the item that we thought it would. It's going to go ahead and make those changes now. So while we're all here, we're waiting, we're doing this stuff. I'm happy to have you here. Let me know if you're, if you're here in the chat. If you're just observing, that's fine. But if you're here in the chat, you want to tell me a little bit about what you're up to these days. I always love hearing what's going on. I know, Christos, you've been all over the place lately with all sorts of various things. I saw you doing stuff with Azure Functions and Key Vault recently. That was really neat. And of course, you've been saving my butt a bunch of times on the some Azure B2C stuff, which I've greatly appreciated. But if there's anything else that you folks are doing or what you're up to, I'd love to hear it. So go ahead and drop it in the chat. And now, let's see, it's waiting now. Terraform is applying some things. Still working to modify it. And so one of the nice things I love is I do feel that, and granted, I hear there have been some improvements in the ARM template space, and I haven't been there working with that for a while. But Terraform really sort of captured my heart when it made it so straightforward to work with state for infrastructure, and where it really captured the idea, I think, of infrastructure as like a living, breathing thing where you're applying changes, not just sort of deploying a set of values. I really think that it's very explicit about how things work. Now let's see here. We do have an error. Failed while waiting for the app service source control configuration. Code failed. The async operational failed. Okay, let's see any other additional information. All right, looks like it maybe just failed here. So let's go ahead and run Terraform apply again. Let's see what's going on. Since we're just changing the settings of this case, I'm hoping that this should be sort of idempotent. We shouldn't really, cause any trouble by applying this again. We should either the state will now be reflected in the current state that Terraform pulls after it refreshes that state, or we'll still have to make those changes. So note here, which I think is really really interesting. So something's going to be updated in place. Notice it updated the other two values. You don't see three changes to be made here. You just see that rollback enabled is going to be set from false to true. It was able to apply two of my changes previously, but not this change. And so it's asking me if I want to apply this change. I'm going to go ahead here and you can't see it on the screen, but I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Oops. I'm actually going to go ahead and clear the screen and do this one more time. I entered the wrong value, so I figured I might as well clear my screen and do it. All right, we'll be asked what we want to do again. We'll go ahead and click yes. All right, I'm being asked, it's off the screen, but I'm being prompted, do I want to make these changes? I'm going to type yes. We'll go ahead and let it change that last setting. And since we got the other two done successfully, hopefully this setting changed successfully, and now we're in sync with what we want, which is what's defined in our Terraform script, or our Terraform settings, and what we have in our current state. So Terraform is closing the gap there right now, and hopefully we'll see that setting is set correctly. And if not, quite frankly, for the sake of this broadcast, I might just change it back and move on, because I'm not super concerned about the setting being set. I kind of just flip that switch on rollback enable just for the heck of it. So we're still waiting for it to modify the functions here. It's tough to see what's going on. Oh, there's that stink bug. I'm not kidding. There's a bug here. Oh, come on. This is fun. Okay, well, he's flying over to the window. He's happy. We'll let him be. Live air, folks. Live air. All right, so we're still trying to modify the file. You can't see everything here on the screen, but we're at 50 seconds elapsed so far. Still waiting to modify it. Now, if it times out again, then it does, and I'll go ahead and change the settings, and we'll say it's all good. It's fine for it to stay at the default. Now, typically we might just have to retry this a few times for Azure to catch up, or I may find that there's something with this provider that is currently having some trouble, or with that specific setting that's a problem, right? So currently, if this mattered to me, I'd be going into further troubleshooting. I'd be looking into the error. I'd be looking into the provider. I'd be making sure that that's still a valid configuration, etc., etc. For the purposes of this demo, I don't care so much. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this and rollback enabled. It was set to true, which is what Terraform was trying to apply. I'll set it back to false, which is the default there. And I'll just say, choose not to care about rollbacks. Azure RM was timing out and we needed to move on. All right, we'll just go ahead and commit that. Now we'll go ahead and run Terraform apply again. What Terraform should do in this case is go refresh the current state, and it should match what's in the configuration file now, since I changed that to false, and false is what the value currently is. And so I would expect that we would see at this point that the configuration has been successfully applied. We'll see if that actually comes to pass here. All right, so it's refreshing that state and analyzing the options there. All right, we can see apply. Oh, well, you can't see. I can see on my screen here. I really got to fix this visual. So we can see, see if I can maybe make the text smaller. So here we see, yes, apply, complete, resources, 0 added, 0 changed, 0 destroyed, and our Terraform file is now in sync. So let's go see what got deployed, because actually I'm curious as to whether it actually deployed any functions there, or whether it still needs to be fed something about the directory where the functions are. Now maybe it just kind of recursed through those directories and found the functions. I'm curious. So you see the Azure Functions Sean demo app. Let's see if we have a function here. Okay, so there are no functions. Read-only mode because you have source control integration enabled. Okay, that's good. So let's go ahead and look at configuration for our function. Oh, I always forget where this is in the Azure portal. Forgive me here. I do not want the console. I don't think I want. No, this is not what I want. Forgive me as I look for the settings that I'm looking for. Oh, deployment center. So we think we see, okay, so we do see that a deployment failed, which is good. That makes sense. So let's see what the settings are here. Okay, so the source is GitHub. I've signed in as me with this organization, this repository, the branch. I actually have a link here that I can go to it. So it is definitely pointing to the right spot. Oh, I do have that. Okay. So I think I need to tell it somehow what subfolder to use here, or I've got to move some stuff back to the root because maybe it expects it at the root. And I'm going to see, let's look at here in the other settings here for Azure Functions here. Okay. Just looking for some additional attributes. I'm just going to try and cheat here and see if I can look for directory. I don't need the Active Directory block. No, it's all about Azure Active Directory, which is great and fantastic, just not what I'm looking for at the moment. Okay, so not that. Let's look for folder. Okay, we'll go to our, let's see, Terraform Azure RM function app folder. Let's see. Nice, the links I've previously gone to. We'll check it out. Playing Azure Functions of Terraform. Yep. This is a nice walkthrough. Who did this one? Hey, Dennis Bappert from a little while ago, from 2019. But I love coming across articles like this that have nice screenshots and are written up. So shout out to Dennis here for giving us some content that we can look at. see if he came across this problem and solved it. By the way, this is generally how I solve a lot of problems, right? I can take things probably 80% of the way on my own or 70% of the way on my own, right? And I always try to see when I hit a wall. I'm sure I'm not the first person to have this problem before, so typically I'll go and I'll do exactly what I'm doing right now, which is to Google around for the solution and see what's happened here. So let's see. We have a storage blob. So we could point the Azure function to the blob. Okay, wait. So what we're saying here is okay. Okay, so we're trying to run from package in this case. So this is from 2019. I'm not sure this is required, but we're going to check into it. I hope that's not what we have to do to run our website here. Interesting. So it looks like what Dennis is saying now. Again, this is from 2019, right? So things changed since then. So it looks like what we're saying here is that we want to point to the hash of a zip file in a blob, but that's not what I would like to do. I would like to see if I can just deploy from the repo itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move stuff from that source folder, right, that we had before there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take that and I'm just going to move all of that back to the root. Okay, so now I don't have it all in my source folder anymore. I've got it in the, no, let's see. I shouldn't have it in my source folder anymore. I should have it all in this spot. Okay, so now I don't have the source folder anymore. I've got all my stuff in that root folder there, as we might look at. So we'll try that. Let's see. Move functions app to root. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and push all of this stuff to the main branch. So we should actually kick off a deployment there. We should be able to go ahead and our deployment center here and see what's going on there. Okay, so we've pushed that change here. I'm going to double check something here to see if... Okay, so we can see here, okay, we're actually in the process of pending right now, preparing the deployment for moving functions app to root. All right, let's see if the modern deployment center is showing that as well, or if it's just a little bit behind. A little bit behind, but the classic center is showing it right here. Now, okay, it still failed. That's okay. So we're going to look at what's going on there. Updating submodules. Ah, your function app is targeting v3, but your Azure host has function version of around 1. Please change the version using the portal or update your functions extension version app setting and retry. So it looks like what we need to do is we need to be using Terraform here to tell Azure what version of the function app we want here. So let's go ahead and look at what our options are there. Going to go ahead and see if I can do a shortcut here. Okay, so optional, the runtime version associated with the function app defaults to, there we are, defaults to a major of 1. So let's go see what our options are. And it sounded like our options here, I'm just going to double check here and make sure I've got it correct. Functions extension version is 1. What are my valid options? Function runtime settings, runtime version. It looks like we have, okay, so we can specify that as 3. So let's go ahead and do that. So version is just at the root, I believe there. Okay, so we're gonna, in our function app here, version Okay, and we can actually get some IntelliSense on that, which is great. We're going to go ahead and save that as 3. All right, now we've got that. So update runtime to version 3. Let's go ahead and in our Terraform screen here, I'll clear again. We can run Terraform apply. And we should see that runtime get updated. And I do love this. This is where I think really infrastructure as code shines, is in these sort of scenarios. Because if I'm not using Terraform, right, if I'm not doing that, then maybe I just click that drop-down button in Azure Functions, right, and I update it to version 3, right? And there's no, I mean, we have audit logs, of course, but there's no, like, institutional memory record of me doing that, right? So I love the idea that that's version now. And like, granted, yeah, it's not normally if this was a group project, right, I'd be doing it in a PR or something along those lines, so it'd be even more of a record. But even now, we still have a commit that I changed that version from 1 to 3 at that specific commit. So I'm going to go ahead and update that. So we'll go ahead and update that. So that's where infrastructure as code really shines. So my hope at this point is that once this runs, we will be able to go ahead and have that happen. And once it's done applying, I'm going to go ahead and push to main, which should kick off a new deployment of that code as well, just because they're both living in the same repository, which they don't have to be, but for the sake of this demo, they are. So we'll go ahead. We're waiting on Terraform here to go ahead and integrate that. I always forget that we can also maximize the panel size, nice in VS Code. So I'm actually going to go ahead and drag this back down. This great button, you can't see it here. I'm going to drag my own face up a little bit. The great button here that you can hover over for maximizing the panel size. So I always forget about that. I'm going to go ahead and use it, actually, in this case. And click that button and we'll see what's going on here. So still modifying the Functions app to make those changes. This is always the hardest part about applying this sort of thing, right? Is that you got to wait for it to happen, and on live air that's a little bit tough. Hey, I think I see a friendly face in the chat there. Hey, I think if that's Marcelo. Hello, Marcelo. Great to have you here. Sorry if I blew your cover there by calling you out, but it's great to see you, and thanks for joining us. All right, we'll give it a little bit of time here to do its thing. And while I mentioned here, it looks like Marcelo knew I spotted him. While we're taking time to look over this stuff, if you are watching, now's a great time to subscribe, or you can find me on Twitter, or you can save this for future screencasts. I am trying to do this sort of thing a bit more often and get to streaming a little bit more. And so definitely be on the lookout for additional topics. I'm also up to hear what you'd like to hear more about, since I'm doing work with everything from automated testing to various cloud providers to .NET Core, and I'm always up to have a conversation about culture or ecosystems or how we put our tooling together. And Marcelo will tell you I'm a big fan of DevOps in general, and so I'm also always happy to talk about those things. So feel free to hit subscribe or follow me on Twitter by the same username, and happy to talk to you more about development stuff anytime, especially development in the .NET world. So it looks like our Terraform stuff is complete. We have the modifications were complete, which is great. Let's go ahead and just verify that that's been completed here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. I'm going to refresh the app set. Well, let's just go ahead and see what we got here. If we go to configuration now, we should see the latest configuration. Function runtime settings is set at 3 version now, which is great. Let's go to that deployment center. We should still see the last. Now we see the last piece is active. Move functions app to the root, so we should see some functions here. All right, so we do see our timer trigger here. And I should be able to look at the code, I think. At least it'll be read only. So we should see our Sean demo function here. Oh, right. This is the JSON file. Let's go ahead and see if we can manually trigger this function. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the function here. I'm trying to remember. I think I can force it to run. but I may be thinking a little bit old here. If I go to code and test, there it is, test/run. I missed it earlier. Okay, so I don't have any input here, right? We should just see the output of the log message that has my name in it, which should indicate what we've got here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that function. Okay, we're connected to the logs there. I see that it was accepted here. Let's go ahead and run it once more. Okay, so we see here it's a little bit small, but we do see Sean's C# timer trigger function was called. So at this point, that means that we have iterated through our infrastructure to the point where we have an Azure Functions app deployed to a storage, with its storage and its app service plan set up, and we have our separate infrastructure storage in both in Azure and controlled via our Terraform script here. So at this point, if I need to make any changes, I'd be able to do that. I'm just curious, so I'm going to try one more time to put that stuff in the source folder because I don't like it living in the root if it doesn't have to, and I'm now curious to see whether I can do that. So forgive me here, I'm going to go ahead and move all of that into the source folder in my VS Code window, and I do think this will work. My understanding is that it should. So we'll go ahead and say, move back into source. Let's give that a shot and see what we get here. We'll go ahead and publish that. And now, of course, when we push commit to our main branch, the Azure Function Deployment Center will pick up on that. All right, it's running the deployment command. We see that. And I guess we really probably should have updated the text of the function as well, just to be clear about it, make sure it's actually picking up those changes. But I think if this deployment succeeds and we see the function there, that'll be good enough. Check these logs. Watch it do its thing. Still waiting. I need that clip of that Tom Petty song. The waiting is the hardest part. All right, so triggering a recycle. This is good. Okay, so actually this is great. So this is active now. We should see, hopefully, we do still see our function. Great. So it was previously it was just the Functions app issue that was failing, not the location of these files. So great. So now we've actually got it to a spot where we've got our state, we've got our infrastructure folder, we've got our source code. And these are living alongside each other for the purposes of this example, but our infrastructure could live in a separate repository if we need separate access or a separate development lifecycle around our infrastructure, right? If it has to live separately for our organization's controls. But in this case, we've got our infrastructure, we can manage it, we can apply it. And if we wanted to modify something about this Functions app, like say we did want to figure out what was going on with the rollback enabled, or with, we wanted to make it a manual integration or change the branch or anything like that, we're able to do that. And along the way, we were able to see here that we actually, the default for an Azure RM function app is actually set to major version 1, and we were actually able to change that, diagnose the problem we were seeing, and change that to major version 3, and apply that using Terraform. So at this point, we've gotten sort of accomplished the first demo that we wanted to do today. And so, I'm certainly going to open it up for questions right now. If you've got some questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. What I'm probably going to do briefly is I'm going to go grab a glass of water for about 2 minutes. And when we come back, we're going to start to explore a little bit around Azure DevOps. Sorry, not Azure DevOps, the GitHub Actions in this case. I've been working in Azure DevOps a lot lately. We're actually going to go into GitHub Actions. We're going to build up a little .NET project, and then we're going to start trying to run some integrations for things like test coverage or sort of SonarQube integration, those kind of analysis. So we'll look at some things that are out there in terms of packages and tools that we can work with, and we'll build up a little sample .NET app, and we'll see what we can get out of GitHub Actions. And I think we'll be able to take it pretty far. I've used GitHub Actions for a number of things, but I figured why not explore, put it all together, and see what we're able to do. So I see. Thank you, Jim, for showing up here. You see, Jim K. Dev might also know Jim K. Dev as my father. So always nice to have your dad tune in. I hope to be as big a fan of my son as my dad has proven to be of me. So thanks, Dad. But great to be here. So I'm going to step away for a second. Drop your questions in the chat. I'm going to be back after a drink of water, and we'll dive into a sample app and working with GitHub Actions. All right, so hang by for just a few. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for the quick break there. I realized, I put up the standby, but I've actually got a nice little back in five sign as well. Although I realized that I don't actually have a sound when I have it on, so never mind. Okay, so what we want to do next, right, where we've gone through our demo about deploying Azure Functions, so we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to do another demo app, and we're going to push that up to GitHub, and we're going to do something with some GitHub Actions. Okay, so first let's go ahead. I'm going to open my handy dandy Visual Studio because I do enjoy Visual Studio still. Let's go ahead and create a new project. And in fact, you know what? In this case, we'll start off on GitHub. In this case, we'll go ahead and start on a new repository. We'll call it GitHub Actions Analysis.net. I don't know. It's a little bit long-winded there, but so am I. So we'll keep it. All right, we'll leave it public. We'll add the repository. We'll add a Visual Studio git ignore. Yeah, we'll go ahead and make it MIT again. All right, we'll create that repository and we'll pull it down here. All right, with the repository created, I'm going to go ahead and clone that repository. All right, there it is. Okay, so I've got my repository here on my local machine. It's got nothing in it except the README file, etc. So let's go ahead and go into Visual Studio. We'll create a new project. For the sake of this, I'll just I'll create a web project. Why not? We're not going to do too much with it, but we'll make the sample a web project. Okay, so we'll go ahead and choose an ASP.NET Core web app. We'll call it my demo app.web. The solution name will be my demo app. I'm going to place it in my GitHub Actions Analysis.NET project in a folder called source. All right, let's go ahead and let that get wound up there. I'm going to click and create at the bottom right here. All right, so we can actually see here that we've got some choices for the target framework, the authentication type, etc. And in this case, I'm going to keep it pretty basic. Oops. And it looks like I may have actually selected the defaults for those, so it's good that I chose to keep it basic. But we went with .NET Core 3.1, and we went with no authentication, because at this point I'm just not concerned about that. That's not part of what we're demoing today. All right, so we've got my demo app.web, and we've got some Razor pages here. And for the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and add a test project. And for now, the test will be unrelated to the web app we're building. It's more just going to be a demo of the tests themselves. We'll go ahead and add a new project. We'll add a class library, .NET Core class library. Targets.NET Standard .NET Core, okay. We'll just call it my demo app.tests for now. And this is just we're going to demonstrate some unit test coverage and some other things that we're going to want to build out here. So let's go ahead. Yeah, we'll do .NET Core 3.1. Sure, that's fine for purposes of this example. I probably would do .NET 5 typically now these days, especially now that it's been released for a little bit. But in this case, I'm just purely going with what the defaults are there to move things forward. So I'm not too concerned about the choice of platform in this case. Okay, so we've got a test project here. Let's go ahead and add some packages here. So we could choose our choice of unit test libraries. I absolutely love XUnit and NUnit both. In this case, I'll probably choose NUnit just because why not? But big fan of XUnit as well. Have no problem using that. And I love all my test frameworks, and I'm just grateful that they exist. So I'm adding NUnit as well as the NUnit 3 test adapter, just so we can show our tests here in Visual Studio. All right, once we've got those installed, I'm going to go ahead and actually I'm going to use an extension here just because I love it and I want to tell you about it. It's a great extension called NCrunch. If you're doing any kind of work with automated tests, and by the way, I should mention that I'm a happy paid user of this product. I purchased it with my own money here, and I will continue to do so because it's great, but I wanted to give it a shout out here. So NCrunch is a great tool. It'll automatically run your unit tests in the background, or just run the impacted tests if you want. It's a great, if you're doing a lot of like TDD or a lot of rapid fire automated testing and you're really churning through a lot, it's a fantastic tool to run that stuff in the background and give you real-time feedback, like as you type in some cases. And so we'll see some of that during this as well. We're going to tell it by default it can run any tests that we have in parallel, it can run them all automatically, and it's set by default to ignore all tests by default. So let's change that. Yep, run my tests alongside each other, run my tests automatically with changes, let all my tests run. So we'll go ahead and initialize that as well. Okay. And it looks like, and you know what, I'm getting a little tired of you all not being able to see the window, so forgive me. I'm going to do a little bit of real-time changes here in my OBS setup, so don't mind the screen shrinking a little bit and coming over here. I just have the chat up on the right hand side, but I want you to be able to see the whole IDE, and that's not fair if you can't do that. Okay, so we will go ahead and do that, and I think we'll be good to go there. I'll just move that chat off the screen. In fact, let me see. Can I just go ahead and do that? Not quite. Okay. So for now, we'll go from here, and I'll bump up the resolution. So let me know if you can no longer do this. So let's see. Unable to restore required NuGet packages for .NET Core test environment. Let's see what's going on with that. So first, let's go ahead and see if I can rebuild the solution. Make sure I'm good there. Again, this should just be a basic web application. So my build says 2 succeeded. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and just write a basic test here to see if I can get ncrunch to do what I'm hoping it will. Let's go ahead and see. Let's go ahead and say pull class of my tests. Just going to go ahead and say math tests. We'll go ahead and say this is a test. Public void math still works. And we'll say var result equals 1 + 1. Go ahead and import our NUnit framework test attribute there. And we'll say assert that result is equal to 2. Looks like, okay, ncrunch is picking up there. Not sure what the issue is there. So we can actually see our test passing. If I change it to 1, we should see it fail, and we get that great feedback next to us from ncrunch that says expected 1 but was 2. So we get some of that as well. Okay, so now that we know that we've got some tests, they work. We have a test and it works, and we've got the web app here. Let's go ahead and do that. And in fact, just to get some test coverage going here, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a class here. And yes, it's in a web app, and I'm just creating a class to demonstrate the test. So we're going to all suspend our disbelief for a second here. I'm going to call it, because really the goal here is to get to a spot where we're doing GitHub Actions and getting some analysis on this. So, I don't want to think too far into this, but obviously this is probably not how I structure this at home. We're going to create a calculator class, right? We'll do the basics. We'll give it an add method, and we'll test the add method, right? So let's go ahead in our production code here, right? I've got my calculator class, and I'll go ahead and let's change this class1.css to calculator tests.css. Okay, and we'll rename this to calculator tests. All right, so I'm not using the calculator class here at all, but we'll go ahead and, in fact, we'll create our calculator class here, and I'm not going to do TDD in this case. We're going to create a method here, and this should hopefully demonstrate that we have a test that passes, but we have lower code coverage, and we'll do some code coverage analysis. Then we'll put some tests around this calculator class, and then we should be good from there. So we'll have that, and we'll say return number 1 plus number 2. All right, and we're going to go ahead and we'll also do one for subtract. Return number 1 minus number 2, right? And this is again basic, right? This isn't production grade code by any stretch of the imagination. So we're going to have we've got our test there. We've got a web app. We have this idea of a calculator class and the idea of a calculator test class, but nothing is really really real about it there yet. Okay, so we've got some changes here. Looks like we've got our files here from the basic beginnings of things. So we'll say, okay, basic setup. We'll say just, for my own notes down here, I've got a default web app test project with NUnit 3, a calculator plus calculator tests. Now, normally probably want to do this as separate commits or so that, but we're just getting started here, and I'm just trying to get to the main event. Okay, so we've got a repository there. We've got our main branch, right? Stuff is now pushed to it. So let's go ahead and look at what. There we go. Stretch that out a little bit. Let's go ahead and look at GitHub and the actual. Sorry, wrong shortcut. Go ahead and look at GitHub here. And look what we got. All right. Great. So in our GitHub, we now see the source / my demo app. That's great. So let's go ahead to GitHub Actions up here. Right, and by the way, I'm used to doing this in like YAML now, but I'm going to go ahead and see what GitHub is offering sort of out of the box in this experience, because it looks way better than when I first started working with it. So let's go ahead and see workflows made for your C# repository. Well, that's nice. It knows I'm using C#, and out of the box it suggests some build and test a .NET or ASP.NET Core project. Well, that sounds pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and set up that workflow. Let's see. So what's happening here is you'll note that GitHub has started creating a file for us in the .github folder. It is going to create a subfolder called workflow, and here it's calling this .NET.yaml. Now in this case, I will probably call it build and test.yaml instead. The name, instead of .NET, right, we'll call it build and test. We're going to do on any push to the main branch, and on any pull request against the main branch. Oh, sorry, the text is very small. Let's see if I can go ahead and make that larger. There we are. Okay, so we can do this here, and we can. Oh, sorry. See you later, Marcelo. I just saw that you had to head out. It was great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. So we can see here now we actually have with .NET version, and I think we are going to want 3.1.x. I think we can do that. Now the question is whether that means .NET Core or not. So I'm going to go ahead. Well, let's look at the overall structure of this first. So first we have a job. The first job is called build. It's going to run on Ubuntu. So it's going to run on Linux. And the steps that it's going to complete are, and I'll go ahead and change this back. The steps it's going to complete are, it's going to use the action/checkout action first. And then what that's going to do is by default, that's going to pull all of the code that's in that branch, or that's in the PR branch, or whatever the current branch is there. It's going to then run an action called setup.net, which uses an action called actions/setup.net. It's passing it an argument for a .NET version to use. Then once it's installed that, we're going to run a step that we're calling restore dependencies, which will just run .NET restore on the command line. Similarly for .NET build, and similarly for .NET test. And we also say don't run the build again because we've already just run the build, and we're going to have a normal verbosity in this case. So let's go ahead and see how that fares by default. First thing I want to do though is I do want to look at this action/setup.net. And what I love about this is I can go to the page here and I can get some great usage information normally. So we can see, for example, .NET version actually by default here. I was wondering if I could change it to 3.1 to match my support here, and it turns out 3.1.x is actually what they have in their docs, so that is perfect. I'm going to come back to my file definition here and change that to 3.1.x. Now again, I could use .NET 5, but I'm just keeping it the same as what my app is currently being targeted for against, because that works fine for me, and I just want to be consistent with that. So it looks like at this point it's doing what I would want it to do out of the box. Right? It's going to restore, build, test. Okay, well thanks GitHub. That was a great heads up. So let's go ahead and start that commit here. I'll leave the default message there and I'll commit it directly to that branch because we're not going to create a pull request here. Okay, so I've created that. I'm going to go ahead and pull that so I don't forget about it. We can edit it locally now. So let's go ahead to the Actions tab and see what's going on. We can see here that it is now running actually. I can see the job here to the left called build, and if you're chaining multiple jobs, it gives you a nice little visualization here of that. And so we can actually see what's going on here. So we can see it's currently setting up .NET. It's running .NET install. It's restoring the dependencies. Oh, something happened. Let's see. Specify a project or solution file. The current working directory does not contain a project or solution file. That's fair enough. We had actually changed the location of that. So let's go ahead and look at our GitHub action here. And in fact, I will go ahead and let's go ahead and edit this right in the browser here. So I'll go back to my GitHub action file here, and we can see here that it says running .NET Restore. But remember, we put our project in a different directory. If I look here, we actually have it in src/mydemoapp/mydemoapp.sln. So I think what we're going to want to do here, right, is we're going to go back to our actions file and edit it. And I want to run .NET Restore. I think I want to do it based on src mydemoapp mydemoapp.sln. I think similarly I want to do that and that, and I'm just going to check that. Oh, wrong one here. Let's see. src mydemoapp. All right, we'll see if that works. Let's go ahead and see. Now, the nice thing about this too is that the cost in this point is pretty low, right? If we screw it up, we're going to watch it run and fail. So I feel pretty comfortable iterating quickly, which is one of the things I love about GitHub Actions. As you're getting started, it's fairly, because they run so wonderfully fast, and you don't have to wait for 20 minutes of queue time, and things are pretty instantaneous. It makes it really nice to be able to just, okay, the pressure's kind of low, right? If I screw this up, I'm not wasting a half hour, I'm wasting a couple seconds and getting some quick feedback. So I really like that when you can get those kind of small feedback on your build cycles here. Let's see. All right, so if project file does not exist, all right, let's look at that. .NET Restore. Okay. Does not exist. Okay, I might have to do the checkout directory and do a variable there. So I'm just going to go ahead and look up GitHub Actions, checkout directory variable. I know there's a canned variable for this. This is the GitHub checkout one, actually, so don't think we'll get it there. The workspace directory path is, I think, exactly what I wanted to. Let's see. The GitHub workspace directory path, a copy of your repository. So that is exactly what we're going to want to use. If you don't use, the directory will be empty. Okay. So we do use that, and we're going to go ahead and use that variable here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and update our actions file. Sorry, let me go find it. Let's go back to our actions file here and edit it again. I believe we should be able to do it that way. Let's try that. Now we should have a reference to the actual place where that code is checked out. We'll give it a shot. Again, I'm a little rusty on this, so we'll see. And if I'm flying too much by the seat of my pants here, we'll put in a little effort and make sure we learn it the right way. Okay, still project file does not exist. Did I spell it wrong? Perhaps I spelled it wrong. That is always an option for me. Let's see here. Oh, I did spell it wrong. There we are. So either there's really no one watching right now or no one is paying attention to that. Either way, I'm glad they didn't see my mistake. Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and save that. The file should definitely exist now. We'll start that workflow run. We'll let it do its thing, and hopefully we get some better results now that we've not typoed the name. That looks better. Things are restored. Things are now building. Build has succeeded. Okay, let's see what happened with tests here. Runner. Thought we set it not to build, which is interesting. And I don't see that we actually ran any tests here, which is interesting to me. So let's go ahead just to make sure I've got this right. And I'm going to fail a test. I just want to make sure it's going to fail for us if we don't have the appropriate tests working here. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh that repository, pull that in from GitHub. I should have a couple commits there to pull in. And while it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and fail this test here. I'm just going to make it 0, right? So we should see it fails locally. And if you can hear that, you should know that my infant son is very excited to participate in these kinds of broadcasts, and maybe we'll have him up here in a little bit if his nap doesn't quite go as planned. But if you hear some wonderful squealing in the background, that would be my little guy. All right, so we've got that. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's try a failing test. I'll go ahead and commit that. We'll push that up here. Not certain why GitHub Desktop is taking so long in this case. Okay. Great. Looks like interesting. Looks like hanging in some cases, but let's go ahead and see if build number 5 here. I would expect at this point build number 5 to fail because a test failed. If it doesn't fail, then we know we're not running things as we'd expect, and we'll go ahead and troubleshoot that first before we go any further. All right. Okay, so something's definitely going on here, right? So we're not actually running the tests here. So .NET test, I think I know what's going on. .NET test isn't actually being called. I think there's test.sdk, Microsoft.NET.test.sdk. I think we may need to install that as well. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I think that's required to get this to run in this environment. So I'm just going to double check that. Add Microsoft.NET.test.sdk. We'll go ahead and push that up and see if that does any better for our test discovery. All right, let me see that. Let's go watch that queue up here. What are, for those who are on the chat, first of all, thanks for being here. Second of all, really interested in if you want to tell us a little bit about anything that you're using to test your apps, or what current frameworks and tools you're using. And that's because I'm always interested in picking up that stuff. I've been using NUnit and XUnit and SpecFlow forever, and a bunch of different libraries alongside them. But I'm always interested in hearing about what you're using to automate your testing and to do some of your tests these days. So if you get a second, feel free to drop that in the chat, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. Okay, this is what I wanted to see. There we go. So we are running the test now. We did add that Microsoft.NET.test.sdk. Looks like we're good to go. Let's go ahead and pass that test again. So we're going ahead and we'll push that up there. Now we should watch the build fail. And now we're at a spot where we at least have some code and some tests that are passing. And you've gotten to watch us troubleshoot a GitHub action already. Okay. So we'll let this go, we'll let it pass, we'll let that test be green, and then we'll move on to the next step. And the next step, while we're waiting for this to go, just to give you a little bit of a heads up, is I want to start thinking about what are some of the code quality tooling and some other items that we can have that are going to give us some insight onto what our code is and what it should be doing. And so one of the things that we're going to do is talk about like SonarQube or static analyzers along those lines. And the other thing we're going to do is talk about test coverage. And I haven't set it up before, but today I think we're going to try to set up a tool called Coverlet, which my understanding is that is a great tool for sort of understanding code coverage and whether or not your code coverage is going up or down. And I should mention that I don't get too invested in code coverage as a static metric in terms of like you should have your code 80% covered. Like I've been doing testing for a long time and I'm not particularly concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the trend line for various types of automated testing. So I want to know, hey, if I'm committing this piece of code, is it really reasonably covered by tests, or is my code coverage really going to go down? And really my goal is to kind of make sure that my code coverage doesn't get any worse than what it is, right? And we always try to get a little bit better each time. And so as part of that, I just want to get some insight into something like this and getting that to pass. Now, here we go. I see here that it has passed. Okay, great. Test run, test successful. It passed. Great. Okay, so now we're at this spot where we can start looking into some of what we can do here with GitHub Actions. So I'm going to look and see here about. I'm going to see if I can add a coverlet workflow here. So I've got build and test, right? And let's see if I can go ahead and I'll go ahead and edit that again, actually. I called it build and test. I might need to call it something else. But search marketplace for actions. So I love this, by the way, that we have this list off here to the right-hand side. Where we have some great references to some things that we can have here. We have featured categories, and one category even is code quality. So I haven't explored this yet, so I'm just gonna look at it. Okay. Doc generation, Sonar Cloud scan, so you can detect bugs, vulnerabilities. Okay. .test analyzer for .test analysis, SAST scans, check marks, deployment scans. So this is great that we have access to this sort of stuff. I'm going to look into some of that next, but for now I'm going to see what we got here in terms of coverlet. So one thing that's pretty great, and also that I want to make you aware of, is that we see here a coverlet coverage test, and it's by a user B3B00. Run coverlet coverage using an msbuild.rsp generated configuration. Okay. Well, so one of the cool things about that is that this is a custom action that is coming from someone in the community who's created this action. And I've been a benefit of so many of these GitHub actions before. So the contributor here in this case, this user Oliver Duhart, B3B00, is a software engineer in France. Fantastic. And he's put together, they've put together, I don't know what pronouns they're using, but they've put together a coverlet coverage test action here, and they've deployed some versions of it here. And we can see what inputs and outputs it is. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with GitHub Actions, I'm not going to spend too much time on this for the sake of this specific demo, but GitHub Actions is phenomenal, and it's largely container based. And so if you want to take a GitHub action, really is you can create a container, deploy a container, set up some specific inputs and outputs for that container, and then you can begin to publish that as a GitHub action. And that's vastly simplified, of course, but there are a lot of great examples for how to get this sort of thing working out there, and GitHub has done such a phenomenal job of making this ecosystem possible for people to contribute to and really accessible for people like me to go ahead and build on the work of others. So I think it's really interesting, and I do think that it's important to call that out when we see it. So I could use a coverlet coverage test here, and I'm just going to look at the other important thing to know when you're looking at GitHub Actions, right, is that this is someone else's container essentially that is going to do stuff with your code. So I can go look at exactly what it's doing if I wanted to. In fact, I'm going to go do that in a second. So I'm going to pull the GitHub repo here, and I can actually go ahead and see if I wanted the definition of the action file here and what it's built on. And I could go ahead and look at how it's set up and where the container definition is in some cases, and we can sort of get an idea and understand what's happening here in this container. All right, so let's go back to what it's telling us in terms of how to use it. So inputs required is the path to the unit test project relative to the repository root. So okay, test project / test project /csproj. The output, we want the name of the coverage output file. The format of the output coverage file, and Coverlet's got some documentation there that they link to. Very nice. And anything that we want to exclude for coverage. And then we can set what we want the path to the coverage file to be. So for example, it can be used to send data to coveralls. Okay, that's pretty great, because coveralls is another tool I've heard of that can sort of output the response of this stuff. That's great. Okay. So we can see now chaining. Oh, there's actually an example here too. Fantastic. Of chaining coverlet with coveralls. So we see an example here where we can use this action at this specific version. We pass in, we give it the output format. We say what we want to exclude. Then we run a task called coveralls, where we then use this coveralls app GitHub action, which looks like it may be from the official source. We'll have to check that out. And then you pass it your GitHub token, and then you pass it the steps to the coverage file. Fantastic. So we can look at that, and we'll look at that and give that a shot in a second. So first of all, I'm going to look at real quick to make sure that none of these are a paid service, or can I actually use these? Making sure that we've got. I just want to make sure these aren't a paid service I'm going to have to sign up for this demo. A lot of these are free for open source projects, but I just want to double check. Okay, using code coverage for unit testing. Looks like we've got some docs articles on this. Coverlet is part of the .NET Foundation. Fantastic, I did not know that. So Coverlet is a cross-platform code coverage framework with support for line, branch, and method coverage. It works with .NET Framework on Windows and .NET Core. Fantastic. Free, open source, wonderful tooling, powering our ecosystem, supported by the .NET Foundation. I love to see it. Great. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure I star that project. And then looks like we've got a lot of great docs here. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about Coverlet. That's great. And let's see, coveralls was, I think, of course, coveralls testing. So coveralls is test coverage history and statistics. So you can sort of see your test coverage, get started for free, check out the pricing. By the way, I mentioned that I want to make sure we can use it for free. I'm a big fan of paying for software like this that helps make your job and your life easier. We see here that in our case, coveralls is and will always be free for open source. Our demo is open source out there on GitHub, so we are good to go. So let's go ahead and get started with Coverlet and coveralls. We'll go ahead, I think we have to sign up for a coverall still. Open source sign up. We'll do GitHub sign up, organizations and teams, read-only access. I'm going to not grant it any of those. I'm only going to have it for mine. Okay, I'm going to authorize that in this case. Yep, I am comfortable with that. Okay, let's go ahead and get redirected back. All right, so my selected plan here, I'm going to choose my organization here. I think it's in the process probably of loading. I'm going to change the plan. That's okay. In this case, I'm doing the open source sign up. I think we'll be okay. Oh. Go ahead and choose. Okay, I do think it's taking a second here to load this up. While we're waiting on that, let's go ahead and just for now get started with Coverlet itself. Let's go back to the GitHub action here, and we'll use this example, right? So let's go ahead. First, we'll use the coverlet action. Thank you, B3B00. Let's go ahead. We've run the tests, right? So now we're going to have, we'll have the name. We have to change the formatting on this, of course, but we'll have the name coverlet for coverage. That's what we're doing with this step. We're going to use the coverlet action to do that. Okay. Use that with, I'm going to try and, okay, with these variables here. Okay, so now we're going to run coverlet with those settings. We don't want my project test. We want the test project to be, in fact, I'm going to give it the full path here, just because why not? We'll probably extract that into a variable, or at least we would in a little bit. Okay, and of course it wants the path to the test project. So let's be specific here. It's /src mydemoapp.tests. Okay. mydemoapp.tests. I'm sorry. Make sure I've got that right. Change the slashes there. mydemoapp.tests scs proj. Oops, I don't want that. I don't want to change that piece here. There we go. Let's actually do that here in the test project folder there. All right, so that should be the path to our test app. We should see output there, and we're going to go ahead and start that commit and run it. Add coverlet. All right, we'll commit that change. We'll check our actions. We'll see how we're doing there. I'm also curious to see, and this may be something that we find out, I'm also curious to see whether GitHub Actions will do some reporting there for us based on what we've got there. So let's go ahead and see. So if you're still following along, thanks for joining us. We did some Terraform deployment with an Azure Functions app previously, and now we're on to working with GitHub Actions and looking at some reporting and some kind of things we can do with test coverage and some different outputs for a .NET Core application. So definitely interested in hearing your inputs around things that are going on and what you're using for testing and other kinds of information there. I'm also realizing that I may not have an internet connection right now, though interestingly enough, I'm seeing certain things working and certain things not. So we'll see what's going on there. All right, what happened here in terms of coverlet for coverage? It looks like I may be offline at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and check what's going on there. One moment, just to check something real quick. Don't mind me. I may not currently have an internet connection, which would explain why I'm not able to see people in the chat. All right. Well, that does explain a lot. Let's see what happened here. It looks like something may be going wrong here currently with my internet connection, and if so, you may not be hearing me say this at all. Checking into some things right now. All right, well, folks, I apologize if you're not able to hear me. I'm going to go ahead and send a chat real quick just to see if anybody can hear me. to the chat just to double check things. Let's see if we are able to actually get to a website here. Just use Microsoft.com here as the default. And it looks like we may be having a little bit of difficulty. And so I'm actually going to go ahead at this point and cut the stream because I'm not certain that you're going to be able to hear me regardless. And so what I will say, if you were able to tune in, is since I'm not able to see what the actual problem is here, I just want to say thank you for tuning in today. And when we get back for our next stream, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at how to continue this operation, and we'll maybe make some more commits in the meantime. We'll go over what we've done, and then we'll walk through a more rich reporting ecosystem for GitHub Actions. But thank you for spending the time with me today, and I certainly do appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you more here on the stream as I begin streaming more and more. So thank you for your time today. I'm going to go troubleshoot my internet connection, which has got to be one of my favorite ways to end a stream. But we will see you back here hopefully shortly, and I hope you are doing well, and I hope that you and yours stay safe. And until next time, we'll see you then. All right, bye everybody.